Welcome to section 7-5 percents. In this section we need to be able to work with percents and decimals. There are four main categories of problems in this section. The first one is to convert percents into fractions. The second one is to solve what are called percent of problems. The next is real-world applications. Where do we see percents in real life and how are they used? And the last section we will have some equations that involve decimals, and we will learn a nice easy trick in order to solve those. Alright, our first goal of this lesson is to convert percents into fractions. All you need to know in order to do this is that percent literally means out of 100%. So when I say 60%, I'm really saying 60 out of 100, and that is a fraction. Then I just use my reducing fraction rules, divide them both by a factor they have in common, in this case 10, and then again by 2. 3/5 is the fraction equivalent of 60%. This next percent I have is over 100%. That's okay, I can still use the same method. 360% means 360 out of 100. If I divide both by 10 and then divide both by 2, I will have 18/5 as my improper fraction. The back of the book will give your answer as an improper fraction. If you want to give it as a mixed number and say, well, 18/5, I can take 3/5 or 3 groups of 5 out of there with 3 left over. 3 3/5 would be an acceptable answer as well. The final one we have here is a little more difficult. It already has a fraction involved. That's fine. Let's still use the same method. 37.5% means 37.5 out of 100. Now I have a fraction within a fraction. What I'm going to do instead of dividing both by some number is I'm actually going to multiply by a number so I can get rid of this fraction. That number that I should multiply by will be the denominator right here. If I multiply 37.5 by 2, I'm going to get the number 75. If I do it to the top of the fraction, I must do it to the bottom of the fraction. And now I have this equivalent fraction with no fractions inside of the fraction. Both of these are divisible by 25, so I'm left with 3/8 as my fraction. The next set of problems we need to discuss in this section are called percent of problems. And they're usually given to you in a statement that says something like this one, this example down here, 32% of 300 is what number? Now if it follows this general pattern, P% of B is A, where P is a number, B is a number, and A is a number, you can set this problem up to solve for the unknown using this proportion. So for this example down here, 32%, 32 is the P. Equals, and I'll have my other fraction over here, I got to figure out what A and B is. Well, it says 32% of 300. Because 300 comes after the of, that means 300 is the B. And then is what number? What number is where the A should be? And A is the number that we're looking for. Now I have a proportion in an equation I can solve for the missing number. Solve this proportion, I will cross multiply. 32 times 300 on this side is 9,600. So 100A equals 9,600. Divide by 100, and I get that A is 96. 32% of 300. Here's another example of a percent of problem. 8 is 20% of what number? This statement follows this general form, except that the A is coming first, and it's saying A is P% of B. But we can still set up the proportion. Percent is always the easiest one to put in. It has the percentage sign after it. So it's going to be 20 over 100. This 8 right here is the A. So we're going to put 8 on top, And the b of what number is what we're trying to look for. B is always what comes after the word of. All right, in order to solve this proportion, I will cross multiply. 20b equals 800. Divide both sides by 20. B is 40. 8 is 20% of 40. Here's the last percent of problem. In this case, the percent is what is missing. So, if I set up my proportion, what percent of 150? That means the percent is what is missing, and the b here is 150. Remember that the b is what's coming after the of every time. Is 3 is a, means that a is 3. Okay, in order to solve this proportion, I will now cross multiply. 3 times 100 equals 150 times p. Divide both sides by 150 in order to solve for p, and I will get that p is 2. 2% of 150 is 3. In this next set of problems, we're going to deal with some real-life situations. This first one is percent discount. So imagine you go to a store and you want to buy an item that is $75. But that item is 10% off. How much are you really going to pay? Well, the first thing that we need to figure out is how much money is actually being taken off of the price. That is, what is 10% of $75? 10% of $75, in order to figure out what this number is, I would convert the percent into a decimal and multiply it by 75. So 10% is equivalent to 0.10. Of, in most math terms, means multiplication, and then 75 is the final number. This comes out to be 7.5, or $7.50. That doesn't mean that's how much the item costs now. That's how much is taken off of the price. So my last step is to subtract it from the original price. 75 minus 750 is 67.50. So the item will actually cost $67. The last of these real-world problems that we deal with in this section are simple interest problems. Simple interest problems would answer questions like if you take money to a bank and you put it in a savings account, the bank will pay a certain percentage of that, the interest rate, for you to keep your money there. So how much simple interest can you earn is what these questions are asking for. So let's say you go to the bank and you put $400 into a savings account, and the bank will pay 7.5%. This situation seems a little bit out there in terms of the real world, but it's just an example. In order to figure out how much simple interest you have, you will put the amount invested times the interest rate, and notice I'm going to convert the interest rate into a decimal. I'm not multiplying by 7.5, I'm multiplying by 7.5%, which as a decimal is written this way. This will tell me what my simple interest is. Grab a calculator. 400 times 0.075 is $30. So by investing $400 at this interest rate, you will make $30 at the end of the year. The last set of problems we have in this section dealing with decimals and percents is solving equations with decimals in them. And I'll tell you that if you have a good calculator, you can solve these equations the way that we have learned already before, Or you can use this little trick, and it's the same trick that we used when we did equations with fractions. You can multiply any equation by the same number as long as you do it to both sides. So in this case, when I have decimals, I want to multiply by a power of 10. So that's either I'm going to multiply by 10 or 100 or 1,000, and then all of my decimals will go away. The way that you choose which one of these numbers to multiply by is to look at the largest decimal you have in the equation. Right here, in this equation, the largest decimal I have is just in the tens place. So since it's in the tens place, I will multiply by 10. By multiplying both sides of the equation by 10, I'm going to get 18x equals 360. And now I have an equation to solve that has no decimals. Again, you could have solved this equation the way it is, or you can rewrite it without decimals. If I look at this equation, the largest decimal I have is in the hundredths place. So I'm going to multiply everything in this equation by 100. Every term gets multiplied by 100. So here we're going to have 200. This times 100 is just 8. This times 100 will be 20x. And this times 100 is 800. If this equation is easier for you to solve, go right ahead. If you're fine dealing with the decimals, you don't need to do this step of multiplying by a power of 10.